Доброго дня.
Good afternoon, dear speakers. Good afternoon, our guests. Ukrainian Crisis Media Center resumes its work, and the current hour briefing is devoted to the following topics: self-defense versus collective security. Which model better fits the national interests of Ukraine? Our today's interlocutors are on the recommendations produced by a commission chaired by Mr. Yermak and Mr. Rasmussen. And to do this, without further ado, handle the mic to Mr. Valery, Chairman of the UCMC board and Deputy Foreign Affairs Minister back in 2009-2010, the former ambassador of Ukraine to the United States. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Thank you for responding immediately to my invitation to participate in today's discussion later. Besides Mr. Ogryzko and additionally to Mr. Lubkivskyi, we will have Mr. Vitaly Portnikov, who will join us a bit later, and we will focus our attention on security issues upon deoccupation of Ukraine. Why today we are going to ask for the opinion from people who are deeply familiar with this topic, those who have not only diplomatic experience, but those who have broad experience in writing different security documents, in deep analytical work, and who are currently involved into the analysis, review of security issues, who have been working and thinking on and considering these topics continuously. It is quite important to understand what will happen upon deoccupation. Of course, all of us here are absolutely sure that Russia would not stop its aggressive attacks on Ukraine unless it feels that that won't be possible. Brings to the agenda the following issue. What we can do. I believe that deoccupation may take something between 6 months and 24 months, and that means that during this time period we have to find a solution to the security issues. Today, the high-level experts in Ukraine and in many countries try to produce analysis and draft solutions to the problem. Today we had seen the text produced by a special committee, security committee. Usually the texts of that level are produced internally, or sometimes even discussed internally in the parliament, for example. But today we find ourselves in a unique situation when a group of experts from different countries and mostly of foreign experts. We didn't know who represented Ukraine in that committee. Nevertheless, that committee had presented the document almost simultaneously to the president of Ukraine, and he ordered to publish this document, and actually the document is expected to to become the basis for our further negotiations with foreign countries and with our partners. And it seems to me that now the move is expected from the partners. From my previous experience of work in the presidential administration, in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and in my role as a public ambassador, the civil society actor, suggests that the documents which are not supported with the society usually at later stages are hampered with the lack of public support. That's why, since this text from the Security Committee, International Security Committee, is published and represents, so to say, the official position of Ukraine, I think this is the right moment to discuss here at the level of civil society the qualities of that document. This is the right time to discuss what should be optimal model which will enable us to ensure security of Ukraine totally from Russia at the moment when our territories will be fully deoccupied. Mr. Ogryzko, the floor is yours. Thank you. I will capitalize on your words that unless broad public accepts the project, the project will not fly, as they say here. Because I believe that the security topic is crucial for any country, and it is of primarily importance for Ukraine, of course, this space. If you have security, you have the perspectives for the development of the country. There are two dimensions for security or possible options for security. The first one is a self-defense concept, and the second is a collective security concept. The self-defense security concept countries like, for example, Finland and Sweden eventually came to conclusion that self-defense was not sufficient for them, and they requested for the access to NATO bloc. And I believe that those countries made a step which was well considered, well grounded. All the rest countries in Europe, almost all the countries in Europe, they have been in the NATO alliance for a long time now. What option was Ukraine suggested? We are suggested the self-defense approach. That is what this is the option which is reflected in this document, in this text. I do not call it document because it seems to me that this is it looks more like fiction, not as a diplomatic document, because for me, as for a diplomat, it looks like a document which could not be potentially implemented. Each document, in my opinion, should start from the definition of notions. That is, I would like to know better what do the guarantees mean. For example, I might recollect the Budapest Memorandum where the term guarantees were meant differently by Ukrainians and the guarantors, and in result of that misunderstanding or different understanding of the same term guarantees, Ukrainians now are giving their lives at the battlefields. And in this current text, nobody knows what the guarantees are and how they will be guaranteed, so to say. And once again, we had seen that in case of attack, we will bring in force Article 51 of the United Nations. I believe that in current situation, when recently Mr. Guterres had demonstrated that the United Nations was not quite capable, quite incapable, so we should not rely on our security on anything which is guaranteed by the United Nations. On the other hand, I'm quite suspicious about the guarantees from the Russian Federation not to attack Ukraine. So the document relies on something which will be donated to Ukraine on tanks, on aircrafts and missiles, cruise missiles, targeting goals at a distance of more than 300 kilometers, while in the past we had similar missiles. And the things which are written in that document, they are not bringing us closer to NATO, but they are taking us off NATO. And while in our constitution we have a clear statement that Ukraine's desire is accession to the European Union and NATO. That is actually, when we look at the document, we may formulate it as follows. It intends not to bring us closer to NATO, but distract our attention from the accession to NATO. Who is in favor of this concept, and immediate reaction in Moscow suggests that that was intentional move. So what should be done? Immediately upon the occupation of Ukrainian territories, Ukrainian government should submit an official request for the accession to NATO. And when NATO will tell us you are not ready, then we should be able to say that and to demonstrate that we are ready. But I think the fact that Ukraine actually today defends the values of the European Union and European values, which are common values, should be somehow paid. And I do not think that we have to invent a bicycle. We have to join other countries, and I do not think in that case we will need any membership action plan, because actually by that moment we would cover all the examinations needed. Before giving the floor to Ms. Danylo Lubkivskyi, I would only make a note that the Kyiv Security Forum, which offered a platform for broad discussions, ad hoc group work, and all that work eventually resulted in the EU and NATO aspirations reflected in Ukrainian constitution. And I can easily recollect what we heard in your forum, and actually I think that you dealt with the bigger portion of the issues which were reviewed and considered by current current committee which produced the document under our discussion today. Thank you for reviewing that and looking at that issue. I would like to point out that we contributed to the work of many environments which worked on the to produce the concept. I would like to describe the Kyiv security concept. This is the new project which emerged based on the following considerations. Our security could be guaranteed only by two things. Article 5 of the Constitution of Ukraine, which says that the only source of power in Ukraine is the people, and this second is Article 5 of the Washington Treaty, and that would prevent us from any aggression against the territorial integrity. That is the membership in NATO is the key provision. That is when assessing or evaluating the newly produced concepts about security of Ukraine, we should keep in mind those basic foundations, two articles, number 5, which I've just mentioned, and to check everything against them. What do we need? We exist in a system where we are very grateful to our partners for their assistance, but actually that assistance is not for granted. That is our priority. Efforts should be aimed at creating economy, allowing us to defend ourselves from aggressor in case the aggression of our neighbor lasts for longer than 1 year and for several years. As for the NATO membership for Ukraine, all participants of the international negotiations clearly understand that we should not allow to distract attention from eventual membership of Ukraine in NATO. We do not have neither time nor space for long-term search, long-term exploration of possible security models for Ukraine. We should take good example of Sweden and Finland and resolve this issue. And we clearly understand that aggression against Ukraine is a long-term goal of Moscow, and this means that the only way out for Ukraine is to join the broader joint security space in Europe. When I think about experts' work, about work of diplomats who are my colleagues, I'm usually positively tuned. And in this document which we are discussing today, I clearly see their good intentions, but let us look at the logic of the document. The document suggests for a complex system of agreements. The complex system of agreements almost always are very vulnerable in real life. Today, we are having this discussion because we believe that this document is of primarily importance, and it was positively perceived by the president. So the logic of this document is as follows, that the document will be just a memorandum without any bounding tools, but based on that memorandum, the whole system of treaties and agreements should appear. But implementation of such a huge task would take much time. In my opinion, it will require a lot of effort and a lot of resources from Ukrainian diplomatic corps. It will require additional efforts from Ukrainian diplomats, additionally to the work to access the EU, to access NATO, to ensure cooperation with other regions of the planet besides the big West and development of Ramstein documents. And thus, I want to say that this is going to become very complex system of agreements, and it will require negotiations. At the same time, these days we observe different processes at the macro level, so to say. Global media these days are welcoming successes of Ukrainian army in regaining Ukrainian territories in the east. In this relation, we see the questions: what will be Russia's response? What will be if Russia decides to respond? What this rat in a corner may decide to do in response to this defeat, and whether they are ready to use the nuclear weapons. And today, actually, we're discussing the scenarios, how to defend Ukraine and Europe against potential Russian threats, especially in response to successful counteraction of Ukraine and successful regaining of Ukrainian territory. That is, summing up, I want to add that right approaches and good ideas should be kept carefully, while we have to focus on things which are of direct value for Ukraine's security and defense, and we should not allow external forces to have doubts about Ukraine's commitment to gain the full membership in the EU and NATO. Our next speaker is Mr. Vitaly Portnikov. And I would like to ask Vitaly to pay more attention and to express your opinion as an analyst, as international analyst, because I know you're a writer, you're a journalist, and you are analyst, and especially international analyst. So my question to you, Mr. Portnikov, is as follows: whether it's worth thinking for you to think about security in broad terms, so to say, not only security against Russia, but against some other countries maybe, or whether we have to point out to Russia as to our major threat. What should be the cornerstone of our security? What should be the cornerstone of our utmost security guarantees? Whether any discussions with partners, foreign partners may help. What do you think? Thank you. I perhaps will sound less diplomatic than my colleagues diplomats here, and I would like to speak on the topic from, so to say, historic point of view. I believe that we are surviving through the existential conflict, although the West keeps saying that we're expecting for it, but actually we are surviving through it. And Ukrainians are absolutely sure that they live on their own land, that they defend their own country and state, and that Russia, which wants to occupy it, they are aggressors, while the Russians believe that they want to take the lands of, so to say, historic Russia lands that in 1991, these historic Russian lands dissolved from it, and that these lands have come back to Russia, and if the population residing in that lands they may go elsewhere, while the Russians have to join this land to annex this land to Russia, and if the population in that lands does not wish to live in Russia, they have to flee elsewhere. Actually, there is nothing new in that conflict. In 1939, the population of Russian Federation, or the historic population of Russia, call it as you wish, had the same sentiment as to Polish and Finnish lands, and they were unable to understand that territories in Poland and Finland were not part of Russia anymore at that moment. But later, the Russia had to agree with the Polish accession to NATO, and today they have to agree with the Finnish accession to NATO, because the generations in Russia has changed. I believe that Ukraine has to survive through another 40 years, and after 40 years, those Russians who believe that Ukraine is part of Russian land, they simply will be dead, and there would be nobody to take this point of view. Actually, this is the historic approach, so to say. I think that we have done half of the task as of now. We have regained our independence, and now we have to do the second half of this work to defend ourselves. When Ukraine became independent from 1991 till the year 2000, this was the period of pressure upon Ukraine to bring Ukraine back to Russia in a form of the Union state. That period lasted till approximately 2004, when after Yeltsin, in early Putin time, they tried to convince Ukraine to become a part of the big union. Then, after the year 2004 till almost now, the attempts were made to bring Ukraine back to Russia via special operation. The period is now in its full development, and the latest special operation started from the belief of Putin that in result of that special operation he would bring Ukraine back to Russia. But from the Soviet Special Services point of view, any unsuccessful special operation only means that you have to start the new special operation and make it more successful. 2 days ago, leader of the communist faction in Russia, Gennady Zyuganov, suggested that the new stage in Russian Federation have to start. They have to start the war. Whether this will be the new leader of Russia, who will come with clear understanding that eventual solution to the Ukrainian-Russian question could be resolved via open and full-scale war. And in this case, we will see the total war, which will target such infrastructure, civilian objects as Kryvyi Rih dam and ruination of crucial infrastructure objects all around Ukraine. Actually, this is not the war of Mr. Putin. This is the war of Russian people. What can stop the Russian people? As any nation, the Russians could be stopped with the threat of physical disappearance. That is either those people who believe that Ukraine is part of Russia, they will physically die because of aging. And in this case, you and me sitting here would not see this happy future. Or alternatively, we have to take the actions which will force the Russian commander to take hands off from Ukraine. This clearly brings us to the idea that the deterrence is in our membership in NATO. This means that Ukraine has to access NATO, which will provide for the possibility of nuclear response to any aggressor, not only Russia, but any aggressor who decided to attack Ukraine. In between, in the time period between submission of a request, formal request to NATO, up to the fully gained membership, there could be any protection status, but I do not see any obstacles for Ukraine to announce today that we are ready to become a member of NATO and to start the accession procedure. And then we should look at the existence of southern and northern Korea. Southern Korea has a protector in the face of the United States, while the Northern Korea has a nuke, but it cannot use it because there is a deterrent. And actually, we are in a very similar situation because from the Russian point of view, we are second part of Russia, and the guarantees should be quite similar. That is, we need to have these guarantees for of our security. We need to have special relations with Russia, quite similar to the relations with Taiwan, with a promise that the massive destruction weapon will be used in case of any attack on Ukraine. And the third, the NATO membership would be promised to us. And in order to gain in this degree of security, we need to have the political will of Western countries. I believe that for them it is much cheaper to provide security guarantees to Ukraine as a NATO member than to provide Ukraine with expensive weaponry, provide Ukraine with money for reconstruction, then spend money on Ukrainian refugees. And nobody knows what may happen to Europe in the result of such a massive intake of displaced people. This might be similar to the great resettlement of tribes in the Middle Ages. And thank you very much. I can add to the official request, etc. I warned you that that won't be a diplomatic speech on my side. Thank you very much for this brilliant intervention. I did not mean that we have to postpone our accession request. I believe that there is no alternative to Ukrainian membership in NATO, and I'm strongly convinced that the accession request had to be submitted long ago. And this is the reason why I'd been so disappointed with our latest participation in NATO summit. And I was very much disillusioned with the idleness of our authorities. Vitaly, I fully agree with your major points. Actually, in this or that form, they appeared in our previous considerations. In only aspect, I disagree with you that Russia would last for another 40 years in its current position. Because in my opinion, looking today at the Russian Federation, I have doubts that Russia will survive without crucial changes for rather long period of time. I believe that Russia will suffer from Ukrainian defeat, and actually, today we are witnessing the last dying sounds of the Russian voice, and in my opinion, today the West is thinking how the world look like after Russia will collapse. In my opinion, After the war in Ukraine, Russian Federation will have no right to continue its existence because this is going to be a global threat for Ukraine, for the United States, and for many other countries. This failure cannot be corrected. Many people in the West continue to expect that upon defeat and upon Putin, Russia would become liberal and democratic country. This is a huge mistake. Russia never had been democratic and liberal country, and you cannot come back to the point where you have never been. This is what we have to explain to our foreign partners, that Russia is incapable to become liberal and democratic. These are half wild hordes, and that is why after victorious end of the war, we will see separate states in the territory of Russia, which after several decades will come to peaceful coexistence with the neighboring states. And in order to do this, we have to deprive the Russians from the most important idea which they have, the idea of Russian greatness, and this common understanding of the Russian greatness is a source of aggressive attitude towards other nations living in the neighborhood of Russia. This is a deep roots of the Russian conscience. I would like to contribute a couple of words to today's discussion, and to add my opinion about some issues. I would like to respond to some points that we have to respond to the criminal attacks on the critical infrastructure done by Russians. I would like to assure the Kyiv residents that it is not easy to target the Kyiv hydropower plant and the Kyiv dump with cruise missiles. But nevertheless, I fully agree with you that such attacks on the civilian crucial critical infrastructure is a crime. Russia kept saying that they targeted exclusively military objects, but the two latest attacks upon CHP near Kharkiv and upon the Kryvyi Rih dump, it shows that they are intentionally targeting crucial infrastructure, and they act without any cover, any disguise now. But Geneva Convention does not care whether you target crucial infrastructure in result of special operation or in result of military combat, war actions, etc. This is a crime anyway. But it seems to me that Russia is concerned about the term war from the point of view of internal Russian legislation, because in case they announce the martial law and in case they announce the war, then Russian population would not be extremely unhappy. During the latest celebrations of the Day of the City in Moscow, somebody asked a question, what was going on in Ukraine, and nevertheless they are calming themselves and they are ready to bring Russian republics, Tuva, Buryatia, etc., to the war in Ukraine. They had taken almost all the criminals from those republics and brought them as soldiers to Ukraine. In today's Russia, you may be put to jail for the word war while Putin's advisors communicate with the criminals in military form in a special criminal language. This also brings me to the idea that the transfer of power may happen in Russia a bit earlier. We may recollect the transfers of power in Russian territories. Even in Gorbachev times, the transfer of power in Russia did not happen peacefully. Even in Gorbachev's times, the tanks were in Vilnius and in Riga and in Moscow. This shows that the processes in Ukraine, this suggests that processes in Ukraine may speed up and something unexpected can happen. But in any case, Russia, fragmentation and collapse of Russia, however quickly it may take place, nevertheless, this would not happen tomorrow. And we cannot count on that. We have to realize that Russia is along our borders and that Russia is an aggressive state, and you may deter Russia and restrain its attacks with quite well-considered policy. We have the issue with the borders of Belarus. We have the problems along the Russian border, and we have the issues of the Black Sea and the Azov Sea. And we need to have the flagships or battleships of NATO, at least one of them, in the Black Sea. And unless we have such a guarantee in the security guarantee in the Black Sea, we cannot sleep calmly. today, Germany and Switzerland are discussing how the transatlantic aircraft should land in Switzerland or in Germany. But look at the Black Sea. You should not surrender Black Sea to Russia to become the internal sea of Russia. Instead of these discussions, the experts continue ambiguous discussions on the things which, from our point of view, look quite simple. Today we'll look at the recommendations. My colleagues and I personally participated in development of similar working groups which produced the sort of similar recommendations. Usually in such a working group you should have a well-balanced membership of Ukrainian and foreign experts who produce the recommendations, and later on diplomats or policymakers develop proper documents, policy documents, and those documents are duly passed, and that's it. As of today, the document which we have been discussing today, it's not the document about guarantee. This is the document which provides for the ways how Ukraine can ensure its self-defense. Actually, it summarizes the ways and means which today are used by Ukraine and its partners to support Ukraine as of this moment. So the document suggests that in case of the next attempt of Russian Federation, all that we are having now will come in force immediately. And here the question arises: whether these are the guarantees. The guarantor means a deterrent, which deters the aggressor from attack on you, while the response measures, these are just response measures. And my second question is, who represented Ukraine in all those working groups who produced the document? I would like to know the names of those experts. I understand that might be officials from the office of the president. For me to understand whether the document was properly worked out. In my opinion, the document was produced in English, and I clearly see the national interests of the United States, France, Germany, lesser the interests of the UK, the interests of Poland, the interests of Turkey. Maybe the Turkish expert was participant in that, and I do not see any Ukrainian interests in it. Actually, this is the probe into the experts' thought abroad to understand how far they may go in their support of Ukraine. Nevertheless, I believe that public discussions of the document are quite useful, and that is actually what we are doing today. And we bring some more people into the discussion. And now I would try to sum up what all the speakers mentioned today. Ukraine requires collective security, basic security. While in the document we see clear the self-defense model. Then we clearly see that as of today, only NATO embodies the collective security approach in Europe. No other organizations are not available since 2011. So, accession to NATO is only one way out. For long ago, the existence out of is now impossible for Ukraine. We cannot be a gray zone. We now are in very dangerous situation. On the other hand, there's requires a lot of resources from NATO and from the EU. So the best way out is a joint border between NATO and the EU and Russia. And in this case, we will be the first country at this border, and the picture will simplify. So the objective is quite understandable. Collective defense. So many many assumptions were made, and that will require huge money. For the next year, 136 billion are required for security and defense sector in Ukraine. This is actually 50% of our annual budget. That's not possible. Even if we deduct 10 billion which are spent on national police, national guards, etc., then $20 billion is required for the war. Minimum 20 billion. If you add procurement of weaponry, we will have a minimum of $100 billion. But any expert in economy may prove that self-defense model does not work for Ukraine from the resources point of view, and the self-defense concept will require to militarize the whole country and to stay in the alarm situation with the whole population, to keep all the men under alarm under emergency all the time. I think the most dangerous phrase which I keep hearing these days, and what I hear from the office of the president, and I think that all officials are excessively happy about the document. The document does not mark any stage. This is just produced statement, and that's it. An agreement about security suggests that in case of attack, From moment one of attack, the military support to Ukraine and declaration of war together with Ukraine should happen. That is, we should not have any stages in our security. Submission of the accession application to NATO should not take long. This should be just several months. This should not be later than the second day upon occupation of Ukraine. That is, we have not to destruct resources, our diplomatic resources, with and destruct them. There should be a plan supported and approved by the President about accession to NATO. There may be, for example, Plan A, Plan B. Of course, we're happy that there is no so-called neutrality status in this new document, but there is a big hidden trap in this document that it may distract efforts of Ukrainian diplomatic corps on the idea of self-defense or the system of agreements which will contribute to the self-defense of Ukraine. And I'm very much glad that the President himself has said this is just a first step, and we will look carefully on the next steps. Our course should be the clear accession to NATO, and this will be our clear task upon deoccupation. If we provide our partners, if we not provide our partners with our clear course on NATO accession, this won't be any success here. We had done today's discussion in order to help, in order to contribute positively, and in order to emphasize that there might be multiple policy options, but the political course of a country, the policy of the country, should not have any alternatives. Thank you to everybody. I believe that this discussion will become more professional, more detailed, and I encourage the broader civil society to join in. Thank you.